I made a short a while back about a girl who had a bit of a gross misadventure with a pool toy. A very stinky misadventure. And a lot of the comments that I got on that post seem to reflect the fact that normally this is something that happens to guys. Often in even more gross and horrifying ways. And they were right. I mean, just look at the coconut story that I covered a while back. But really, that story is just scratching the surface. There's so many more of these. And a lot of them have much more severe consequences. And I warn you, some of the tales in this video are gonna have you uncomfortably crossing your legs. For today's video, let's take a look at some online misadventures with improvised pocket kitties. This video is sponsored by Colon Broom. It was only just a couple videos ago that I had mentioned for reasons relevant to the video that people ain't getting enough fiber in their diets. And that's where Colon Broom comes in. Colon Broom is a high fiber dietary supplement that uses the highest quality ingredients to support your gut health. The main component is psyllium husk, which is proven to help intestinal problems and benefit constipation, diarrhea, blood pressure, and also reduce feelings of bloating. When you take the supplement, it mixes with partially digested food in your stomach, expands, traps, and removes unwanted materials. Why would you want to do this? Well, it helps to lower the risk of cancer and diabetes. It also helps to lower bad LDL cholesterol, and works as a prebiotic to nourish the healthy bacteria in your gut. Colon Broom is having their biggest sale yet with 65% off. Don't miss out on this limited time sale and use code WANG to get another 10% off your order. Just click the link in the description and grab your discounted batch of Colon Broom while the supply lasts. Before I really get into this video, I just want to talk about how, you know how in the first 15 to 30 seconds of a video, you have to keep it extra G-rated or else YouTube is just gonna bury the video and demonetize and all that crap. So the way I get around it is I gotta come up with euphemisms for things. So I'm like, what's a good euphemism for a fleshlight? And I'm coming up with nothing at first. So I look it up, and the things that they're giving me, Alabama egg roll, Fleshkimo brothers. To me, that sounds more like if you and your friend are sharing the same one. Probably my favorite one that I saw was Greenpeace Hot Pocket, which to me sounds more like a Hot Pocket that's vegan, and I'm not sure you get what that is technically vegan. In any case, I wasn't really satisfied with any of those, and then I pulled pocket kitties out of my ass. But anyway, here are some stories of homemade toys gone horribly, horribly wrong. Our first story is like something out of Silent Hill. Specifically, Silent Hill 4, if you know what I mean. TIFU by mostly circumcising myself with a drill and a pool noodle. How do you circumcise yourself with a drill? I'm picturing someone, like doing the fork and spaghetti type deal. Anyway, this is a throwaway account because his friends know his real Reddit account. He talks about the birthday he had the year before making this post. This was a depressing birthday for him as he had nobody to spend it with. All of his friends were too busy to do anything, and that experience made him officially feel like he had reached adulthood. He had also been single for about a year, so he was feeling particularly lonely. So he decides that he's gonna celebrate this birthday by himself with what he describes as an extra special masturbation experience. Starts to look around his house for ideas. Makes me think about how back in the day, people used to wind up on this website called Jackin' World. It's actually still there in its original form, that beautiful 90s web design. This site would have you come up with all kinds of crazy contraptions, like things with sandwich bags, couches, banana peels. But this guy didn't have that, he just MacGyvered something up on his own, tinkering in his basement like a little Thomas Edison. Here's what he comes up with. He cuts off a section from an old pool noodle. I have no idea why this always comes back to the pool toys. Stuffs the noodle with a microfiber cloth, and using a needle and thread he winds up fixing it to the inside of the pool noodle. He then lubes up the inside, puts on a condom, as he says for extra smoothness, and he just goes to town. The idea of using a cloth, any cloth, even a microfiber cloth, sounds like a terrible idea, but that wasn't a problem. He said it was actually really good. But then as he's finishing up his special experience, he notices, at the other side of his apartment, his power drill. I guess on some level, I can understand the compulsion to want to use it. I mean, you get that, that little, twisty motion, right? But you would never in a million years see me put my junk next to anything that could generate that sort of power. But I guess this guy was just braver than I am. So what he does is he puts toilet paper in one end of the tube, shoves the paper into the drill chuck, and then puts the pool noodle back onto himself. It starts spinning, and he says it feels amazing. But it felt a little too good. So good that he kinda loses himself in the moment. And as he starts nutting, he pushes himself further into the tube. Feels fine, but then as he pulls back, he notices that he's stuck in the drill chuck. Specifically, his foreskin is caught in there. He takes his finger off the trigger immediately and tries to get it out, but it's stuck. And while he's trying to free himself from the drill, he's still getting those, like, you know, those, like, little, like, aftershock nut putters. So he's trapped in the drill and still nutting, very reluctantly, as he puts it. He compares it to if you had finished watching your favorite video and then all of a sudden it switches to Ron Jeremy. And then he describes his mission to save his foreskin. I could feel that my foreskin was still somewhat attached, and I didn't want that to change. So I put on my baggiest pair of pants. That's why you should always have a pair of Jenkos ready. I put on my baggiest pair of pants and drove to Emerge. I told them exactly what happened in front of a young woman, family of 5, and an old Indian couple. It was definitely the most embarrassing experience of my life. Although he doesn't remember much of it, he says that the surgery was a success. He just couldn't touch himself for a few weeks, and that wound up being the worst birthday of his life. You got people in the comments asking him to show the surgery scar, but he's afraid that in the future, someone might see his dick and then recognize him from the Reddit post. Of course, this being Reddit also leads to a massive discourse about circumcision. You got a guy in there who's actively trying to regrow his foreskin by stretching it. You got a guy in there that's adamant that it's better to be circumcised, and it gets a little heated in the thread. But ultimately, the poster was satisfied in his decision to keep his. The next story also involves foreskin destruction. C. Bugger writes, TIFU by ripping my foreskin apart with a ceiling fan. I just immediately get this image in my head of, do you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Bart steals Grandpa's dentures and he puts them in his mouth and bites onto the ceiling fan and swings around? I'm imagining that with this guy in his foreskin. Although, you know, he would have had to be a really little guy for it to not pull it out of the ceiling. He begins by saying that this story took place 20 years ago when he was 16. This, of course, was before he was online, so he had to get a little creative sometimes. One day, his mother goes to the store, and that's when he comes up with his invention. He takes a toilet paper roll, fills it with wet toilet paper, and then duct tapes it to his wiener. I had to reread it several times to make sure that he said he taped it to his wiener and not just, you know, to itself. Because there's no way that anyone who has ever felt duct tape would have ever made that decision. But that's not even where the main problem comes in. After he makes sure that the roll is really tight, he makes a rope out of more duct tape and wraps it around one of the blades of the ceiling fan. At this point, the way he's describing it, it sounds like he's just gonna rip his whole damn dick off. Like, this sounds like a deleted Mortal Kombat fatality. But in his mind, here's what's going to happen. When he sits on one side of the ceiling fan, the spinning motion is going to pull and release the tube as it gets closer and further away, thus creating some kind of up and down motion. I've played The Incredible Machine enough to know that the physics don't always work how you think they're gonna work. And this certainly did not work how he thought it was going to work. All starts well as I sit on a desk chair below the fan. A bit slow, but working, so I turn it up. I start to notice that since there is no swivel, the duct tape is twisting and shortening. It's pulling violently on my pubes and skin. I can't get the fucking thing off. I stand up to buy myself time, shut off the fan, pull the string and wait. Oh fuck, still going. I'm on my tippy toes and my pubes are ripping. I pull the string and the fan begins to slow, but it's still twisting. I slam my hand into the fan to stop it. The fan breaks out of the ceiling, but I'm free. He removes himself from the device and finds that he's now got a fistful of pubes. And he discovers that he had basically given himself a penile Indian burn, with tears in his foreskin and spots of blood. And his head is a color that he describes as ghostly gray. A color that gradually transforms into purple over the course of the next day. And then all of his skin would molt over the course of the next 3 weeks. To this day, he says he still has a long white scar down his shaft that has no feeling. And yet now, at the age of 36, he says that he thinks the idea still has potential. It all would have worked if he had a swivel. But I mean, there's no need. I feel like we've gotten beyond that technologically now. I mean, the Chinese invented that suck machine. I don't know. There's a proper name for it, but it's the suck machine. Our last story comes from Catatree Does Games, simply entitled My Fleshlight Horror Story. Like the story before, this disaster was born out of a need to get off extra good without his parents knowing. But unlike the previous stories, this guy grew up with the internet, so he had access to advanced knowledge. Specifically, his friends sent him schematics for a homemade fleshlight. He goes on to explain to the readers what a fleshlight is, as if anybody reading this story wouldn't know. But He then says that he assumes everyone reading this knows about the 2 sponges, rubber glove, and cup method. I'm stumped. 2 sponges, rubber glove, and cup. Okay, that makes sense. Mr. Bean did not say that. In any case, Catitry, a self-described clever guy, wants to level this up a bit. He takes a brick of memory foam, drills a hole into it, then stuffs it with a kitchen glove, and he tightens this device at key points with rubber bands to create a variety of experiences. Then he secures the whole thing with duct tape to a mason jar. What he's describing here, it almost sounds like one of those Tenga devices with different pressure points and little doodad. And he said the experience with this thing was mind-blowing. So good that he used it for 6 months straight, at least 2 days a week, sometimes 3. Every time he used it, he'd fill it with lotion. And although he would try not to, sometimes he would nut into it and eventually just stop caring and did it every time. But he thought it was okay because, you know, it all disappeared every time he did it. I hope you understand. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Eventually, though, he starts getting bored of it, starts using it less, and eventually forgets about it entirely. He puts it away in a small chest in the back of his shelf, where it stays for 3 years. But then one day, he comes home and found that his mom got new furniture, and everything on that shelf was gone, either moved onto his bed or put in a box. That is, everything except for one object. She had taken it out of the chest it was in, maybe just to give me the message that she knew what it was. I was absolutely fucking mortified. I decided that, for whatever reason, I was not going to move the fleshlight anywhere else. I guess I thought that if I didn't acknowledge it, nothing would come of the situation, or at least I would give the impression that I didn't know where it was or that it wasn't a fleshlight at all. But come on, my mom isn't that stupid. But when the furniture guys get there, his mother puts it into the chest and moves it. Crisis averted? Not really. In fact, this might have actually made things worse. The same year, he begins developing some kind of severe chronic breathing problem, but only when he laid down in his room. The symptoms were consistent with some kind of allergy, but he couldn't pinpoint it. He had dogs, but they never bothered him really during most of the day. But whatever it was literally getting so bad that he couldn't sleep at night, and as a consequence, he was exhausted every single day. But with no solution, he just toughed it out for more than a year. And that brings us to 2 weeks before he made this post. He's looking around at his room and he just happens upon Old Reliable. He was pleasantly surprised, like meeting an old friend. And nobody's home, so he thinks, hey, you know what, let's give it another go. By this point, though, he had forgotten his usual routine. 6 years had passed since he had begun using this, and it still looks fine from the outside. He just shoves himself in without any lotion or anything. But despite the lack of lotion, it's wet. He pulls himself out of it and discovers that his member is covered in some kind of black tar. An extremely stinky black tar. This is the Venom origin story that they don't want you to know about. He compared the smell to cheap Chinese takeout that had been left to collect mold over 8 months. Which is such a specific comparison that I feel like he probably had that happen as well. The smell was so bad that he just threw up immediately. Runs to the bathroom and cleans himself off. And now that he's finally clean, there's one thing left to do. You gotta take a look inside. You gotta find out what we're dealing with here. You gotta know the extent of the corruption. So he covers his nose, pulls out the old kitchen glove, and here's what he finds. In The Last of Us, there are times where entire walls will be covered in a thick pink growth of spores and fungal material. I shit you not when I say that it looked identical to what I saw on the inside of that glove. What was obvious to me now that, for whatever reason, was not obvious in 8th grade was that after using a fleshlight, the 3 pumps of lotion and cum you dump in it does not just disappear. It stays there. Pushed deeply into each of the 5 fingers of this glove was a thick black and white spotted mud, which, I'm not joking about this, had eaten 100 or so tiny holes through the glove. Turning it inside out and running it under the tap, the water turned dark brown as I washed the 6 years of moldy cum off my poor mother's kitchen glove. The smell did not leave my bedroom nor the bathroom for 2 days. My mother had made a comment about it upon coming home. I don't think she knew what it was. Obviously, I decided to throw the glove in the trash, which I hid in the very bottom of our trash can. 3 days after he got rid of this glove, his breathing problems disappeared. The man was dying of cum poisoning. But I feel like anyone who's watched this channel before, you knew exactly where this was going as soon as he said the lotion and cum disappeared. Anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, turn on notifications and check out my video about the cum box. I'm out.